Um, thank you, Mr. Clovis Mwamba. Our second speaker is Dr. Roger Kalla. Roger Kalla was a Swedish biological scientist who has worked in Australia for government and private corporations since 1988. He was the chair of the Swedish Church in Melbourne when it sponsored an exhibition called Dag Hammarskjöld-Poet and Photographer. As you know, Sweden voted against Indonesian attempt to wrench sovereignty of West Papua in the United Nations in 1954, 1955, 1956, and 1957. However, after Indonesian military invasions in 1962, Sweden voted like most other member states for the United Nations to ratify New York Agreement. The vote was 89-0 with 14 members abstaining. Please welcome Dr. Kalla. Over to you.
Thank you, Alfred, for the introduction to my talk and to the West Papua Women Committee for the invitation to this webinar on Dag Hammarskjöld and West Papua today. What I want to do is to give you a bit of background to Dag Hammarskjöld, the man, and his upbringing in Sweden, which led to him becoming the Secretary General of the UN. And before Dag became the UN Secretary General, he held quite a low public profile in Sweden and internationally. He was not engaging in any party politics, and he was seen as being a capable public servant in a neutral country. As I said, I will expand on the background to paint a picture of the public and private man. And now I should start to share some pictures here, I think, on my presentation. Hope this will work this time. Just a moment, I'm trying to find my presentation. Technical problems. Just hang on, I think. Ah, here we go. I think I have solved my technical problems. And you should be able to see something now. All right, I hope you see this. That's my first slide, and it says Dag Hammarskjöld, Secretary General of the UN, 1953 to 61, the public and private man. And here we got a picture of Dag Hammarskjöld as in the role of Secretary General in 1958. It was an official image taken while he was in office in the newly opened UN building on Manhattan's east side in New York. If you ever go to the UN building in New York, it's quite a nice building and worth a visit. It's there is a room just at the entry level, which is called the Room of Quiet. It's a room of meditation and reflection. And it was actually designed by Dag Hammarskjöld himself. So he designed all the artwork for the rooms, and it's not very very richly decorated, but everything has a deep and very meaningful position in that room. So I can recommend that for anyone going to New York soon. Not that we can in this time of Corona, but maybe in the next few years. So to sort of backtrack a bit and then talk about Dag and his upbringing in Sweden. Dag Hjalmar Agne Carl Hammarskjöld, as he was called in Swedish, was born in 1905 and died, as Clovis mentioned here previously, in Katanga in 1961. His father was Hjalmar Hammarskjöld, who was actually Prime Minister of Sweden from 1914 to 17. And mother was Agnes Hammarskjöld. Hjalmar Hammarskjöld was, besides being a Prime Minister, he was a full professor at Uppsala University. He was a scientist and a renowned expert in international law. Dag grew up in Uppsala, surrounded by his family, living at Uppsala Castle, the residence of the governor of the region of Uppland, another high position held by Dag's father. By 1930, at an age of 25, Dag had obtained a licentiate of philosophy degree and a master of laws degree. Before he finished his law degree, he had already obtained a job as an assistant secretary of the Swedish government unemployment committee. He wrote his economics thesis, receiving a doctorate from Stockholm University some years later. He developed a successful career as a Swedish public servant. In 1936, he became the secretary of the Swedish Riksbank, or the Central Bank of Sweden. He was soon promoted to serve as the chairman of the Central Bank, later being appointed Secretary of State in the Ministry of Finance. So Dag Hammarskjöld, if you ever go to Sweden, or if you get some Swedish money, on the 1,000 kroner on the 1,000 kroner note, with the 1,000 kroner denomination, you find his image of Dag Hammarskjöld, and on the back side of the other side of the note, you found some of the places, the nature in Sweden that inspire his poems that I'm going to talk about in a bit later. So he was also the governor of the central bank from 1941 to 48, and then he was the Swedish delegate to the Organization for European Economic Cooperation from 47 to 53, and cabinet secretary for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs 1949 to 51, and minister without portfolio in the Social Democratic Government 1951 to 53. So although Dag served in a cabinet dominated by the Social Democratic Party of Sweden, he remained politically unaligned. He showed no inclination to participate in the political infighting. So he's not a political person really, although he was operating in quite a political environment in Sweden and then later at the UN. Then I'm going to turn to Dag Hammarskjöld's political life on the global scene when he then entered the fray. He entered the international political scene as chairman of the Swedish delegation to the General Assembly in New York in 1952. He was suggested as a candidate for a replacement of UN Secretary General the year after. There was a Norwegian, Trygve Lie, that was suddenly resigned from the position as UN General in 1952, and that precipitated the new election of a new Secretary General. Dag was suggested as a candidate for the replacement UN Secretary in 1953. The Soviet ambassador and the British Foreign Secretary also laid a vote on the unaligned Aristo bureaucrat, as they thought he was a non-political public servant, and as such was sort of acceptable to both the Soviets and the British. And finally, the US State Department was persuaded that Dag was as good as it gets. And Dag was sworn in as Secretary General in 1953 in April. He was reappointed in 1957 for another term, and it can be noted it was an unanimous decision by all members of the General Assembly to reappoint him. So I think he did an acceptable job in his first term as Secretary General. Dag's second term was cut short when he was killed in that airplane crash that Clovis mentioned, and in 1961. He was honored by the Swedish, well, the Norwegian Nobel Prize Committee, actually. They are the ones that hand out the Nobel Peace Prize. And Dag Hammarskjöld is only one of 4 people that have ever gotten a Nobel Peace Prize after death. And after his death, there was a number of poems and haikus, that's a form of Japanese poem, short poem, were found, which showed another unknown spiritual side of the man. He was revealed there in these papers, or these poems revealed a deeply philosophical soul that was searching for personal enlightenment. These poems were first appeared in a book in Swedish, and then they were later translated by an English fellow called W.H. Auden, and they appear as markings by Dag Hammarskjöld in the Vintage Spiritual Classic series, and I can recommend that book to anyone that wants to learn more about Dag and his spiritual search in life. Markings has been described by a theologian as the greatest testament to personal faith written in the heat of personal life and responsibility for world peace and order. Of the 100 of the 600 poems and diary entries in the markings are concerned with faith and Dag's relation to God. So he was he had quite a strong faith, and it's shown in these book markings, these collected poems. Hammarskjöld writes in this book, for instance, as a quote from his book: "We are not permitted to choose the frame of our destiny, but what we put into it is ours. He who wills adventure will experience it, according to the measure of his courage. He who wills sacrifice will be sacrificed, according to the measure of his purity of heart." Unquote. And then finally, I want to turn to something that Dag Hammarskjöld and I got in common. It's always nice to find some sort of commonalities in people you sort of admire, and I admire Dag Hammarskjöld. And it is actually the Arctic inner landscape that he carried with him everywhere he went in the world. So he was a lover of nature, and he particularly liked the northernmost part of Sweden, which is above the Arctic Circle, where there's snow on the ground for 9 months a year, and there's a very short summer with lots of mosquitoes. So Dag, he charged his batteries and took solace from his demanding positions in the natural landscapes of the high altitude meadows, grassy fells, jagged rocks and craggy snow-covered peaks of Arctic northern Sweden. Many of his short poems are based upon his brushstrokes of poetic language that touches upon the inner landscapes that Dag carried with him. And Dag Hammarskjöld, there is actually something very unique for Sweden. Is there is actually a pilgrimage trail in Sweden that's called a Dag Hammarskjöld pilgrimage trail, and it's 105 kilometers long. So if you're ever up in Sweden, in northern Sweden, I can recommend to go walking along this pilgrimage trail. It takes about 5 or 6 days, and you have to have a big backpack on your back because there's no way to stop on the way. So you have to have a tent and camping equipment and all that. But if you feel up to it, that's actually something very nice to do. And the trail meanders through miles and miles of high alpine terrain and wide open spaces under a towering sky. And you can also note that this pilgrimage trail goes through the heartland on the indigenous reindeer herding Sami population of the Arctic North. So there's also a cultural experiences to be had during this walk, because you're walking to the indigenous population of northern Scandinavia, to their heartland. So I think I'm gonna stop now here with, here's a picture of me, and that's me on skis. And in front of me is my sledge dog, Stoya, and we are skiing on the Dag Hammarskjöld pilgrimage trail. This is wintertime then. And we are high above a big lake called Torneträsk, which is in the Abisko National Park, where the pilgrimage trail starts down here and then climbs up the mountain. And it's nice on a sunny day, but it's not every day is a sunny day in the mountains. Sometimes it's raining and windy. So you gotta have the proper equipment with you. So I like to conclude this talk by reading a very brief haiku, this sort of short form of poem from a Japanese kind of style. And this is from Markings by Dag Hammarskjöld, translated by W.H. Auden. A sky as blue as that above the snow crest before the last ski run. Thank you.